Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's a rather lovely little what do you call it? A confluence of circumstance or a coincidence? Just glancing at Twitter as we came off the back of that break, Judy Murray tweeting about talent is everywhere, opportunity isn't, in the context of some Ugandan children who are clearly very, very good at tennis but have barely got a racket between them. And it tied in with Francesca's call about football, didn't it? And the lack of opportunity. It is, I mean, historically, sport is one of the only ways, one of the most popular ways for people from humble backgrounds to make their way to fame and fortune and riches. And while there are dangers, of course, in holding up the exceptions as somehow demonstrating a rule, I do think access and opportunity, it's not about becoming, you know, the next Ellen White or the next Wayne Rooney. It's so much to gain from getting involved in this stuff, and any sport at all. 5 minutes after 11. Now, oddly, this does lead into the conversation that we're going to have next, because one of Boris Johnson's suggestions as he makes his latest attempt to set out to stall and distract attention from the fact that his girlfriend screamed "get off me" at him just a couple of weeks ago. Has she been seen yet, Carrie Simons? Has she been seen in public yet? A genuine question, I just don't know. I follow the news quite closely, but plenty of stuff can creep under your wire, because that would be a bit odd if she was screaming "get off me" at her boyfriend a couple of weeks ago and hasn't been seen in public since presumably the police arrived at her door. Anyway, he's going to be our next Prime Minister. I heard someone on Nick's show earlier talking, in the context of these conversations about fat shaming in the adverts, talking about how if there's no shame in society, then, you know, nothing ever gets done, no one ever makes changes. And I thought, mate, you're living in a society that Boris Johnson is about to be Prime Minister of. You really think that shame has a role to play in the context of getting people to stop drinking Coca-Cola? I hope you're right. I do. I believe in shame. This is part of the Catholic guilt that I carry around like a sack of spanners. But generally speaking, if you're going to put Boris Johnson in Downing Street and Donald Trump in the White House, then shame has left the building as something of public significance. Unless, of course, you're poor, because shaming poor people is practically a national pastime. And that, I think, is where this story upsets me most. Johnson has claimed he's going to end the continuing creep of the nanny state. It's almost as if he's gone through a list of hollow cliches that are used to provoke people into baseless anger and feel that they're being persecuted when they're not. I'm surprised he hasn't announced a crackdown on political correctness. Actually, I should check. Has he announced a crackdown on political correctness? Don't be surprised if between now and the end of the month, Boris Johnson announces a crackdown on political correctness without explaining what it is. And now he's going to end the, and I quote, continuing creep of the nanny state, starting with a review of so-called sin taxes on sugar, salt and fatty foods. They haven't been in place long enough to be properly assessed, but minimum pricing for alcohol in Scotland that's had an astonishing impact on sales, and similarly, tobacco, a packet of cigarettes will now cost you well in excess of £10, which is an astonishing amount of money if, like me, you know people who still smoke a pack a day while claiming to be skint. I mean, that's not far shy of 80 quid a week after tax that you're spending on cigarettes. I throw in a coffee every morning from Starbucks, and my first ever pay packet only had £100 in it, although that perhaps says more about my age than it does about economic shifts and behavioural change. But Johnson is clearly saying things that will come as music to the ears of these bizarre outfits that refuse to disclose their funding, but routinely lobby for the interests of tobacco companies, sugar companies, fast food companies, junk food companies. They claim sometimes that they represent taxpayers, but only really seem to represent the interests of people who are currently required to pay a lot of money into the Treasury in order to avail themselves of all the things that the Treasury pays for. Most of us, and I should check the numbers on this actually, most of us take more out of the Treasury than we put in, I think. Quote me 100% on that. Certainly if you fall ill, like really ill, someone you love needs hardcore NHS treatment, then you're going to have to be earning serious Benjamins in order to be taking more money, to be putting more money into the NHS alone than you're taking out. But if you totted everything up, you know, if you looked at the pension you're going to get when you're older, if you looked at the healthcare treatment that you receive now, if you looked at the infrastructure that you benefit from, whether it's roads or railways, some of it will be privatised, some of it is covered by taxpayers. If we were to go to war and our army were to protect you from, I don't know, the next dictator with designs on invading Britain, if you were to be robbed or you wanted help in the street, all of this is why the austerity breaks me. On an emotional, not a political level, I look at my country and I see all these decent people persuaded that the reason why there aren't enough police on the street to deal with stabbings, or there aren't enough doctors and nurses in place to cut waiting lists, they've been successfully persuaded to blame it on the nanny state, or to blame it on immigration, or to blame it on the fact that the mayor's a Muslim, or to blame it on feckless Workshire layabouts, or single mothers, or Romanian road sweepers, instead of blaming it on the Tories who've taken it all away and laughed while they were doing it, while claiming that it was all made necessary by Gordon Brown. And now, in this leadership campaign, they're both turning around, Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson, and claiming that they've got actually loads of money that was there all along, and they'll be able to spend it on everything from tax cuts for people earning over £50,000 a year to bailouts. And this is where you could be forgiven for smashing your head against the mother of all brick walls. Bailouts for the fishing industry because it's going to be so badly hit by Brexit. But hey, people that told you needed to vote leave in order to save the British fishing industry, they're too busy turning their backsides towards an orchestra in Strasbourg to actually explain to you how the hell they've managed to make such an epic error. And we haven't even mentioned what Canada's said about the prospect of rolling over a trade agreement yet. We will, before one, but that's not what we're here to discuss. How do you know whether it works or not? Answer, does it change your behaviour? Okay, so I was at the cinema on Sunday, went to see Yesterday, which is rather good, I have to tell you, the film that posits a world in which everyone except one person has forgotten the Beatles, and so that person quite understandably decides that he's going to become the biggest pop star on the planet by channeling Beatles songs that everyone thinks he wrote. It's a lovely premise. It's written by Richard Curtis, directed by Danny Boyle, so no surprises for saying that it's an absolute heart-tickler. Between you and me, I prefer the look, on the strength of the trailers alone and the fact that I know the fellow that wrote the book it's based on, Blinded by the Light, which tells the tale of a lad from Wolverhampton whose discovery of Bruce Springsteen changed his life. That looks beautiful, that film. Keep an eye out for that one. But in the meantime, by all means, go and see Yesterday. It will put a smile on your face. But I'm at the cinema, and I don't know why. I don't drink pop anymore, I guess, is the reason. It was one of the things I just decided to give up when I saw how much sugar was in it. You remember those pictures that used to go around primary schools where they'd actually have the little plastic bag full of sugar? And you'd think, no, that can't be right. That's about 13 grams of sugar in one tin of pop. And I used to drink a lot of ginger beer, which had one of the highest amounts of sugar in it. And when you saw it in a bag, the amount of sugar, you just think, well, you wouldn't eat that with a spoon, would you? So I knocked it on the head. But occasionally, special occasions, as with everything, in all things in moderation, except Morris dancing, I asked for a Coke at the Odeon, and the fellow behind the counter said, normal, or full fat. No, normal, he'd say, would he? Regular Coke. And I said, yeah, of course. Don't drink none of that zero rubbish. Regular, and he said, there'll be a 17 pence sugar tax on that. Is that all right? And that's never happened to me before. I presume it's on the signs when you're buying it retail, but obviously I've not ordered a Coke in that sort of context since these taxes were brought in. And I still had it. 17 pence wasn't enough to put me off. But oddly, you know, it was enough to make me sort of go, oh, actually, do I want that? The fact that there's a tax on it was a deterrent, not the fact that it was 17p, which, you know, call me Nelson Rockefeller if you want. I'm not going to notice 17 pence in my weekly incomings and outgoings, but it was a little bit of a reminder of how much sugar was in it. So it's not just about the money. It's almost like a health warning, you know? And health warnings don't work that well traditionally. I don't know about you, but a friend of mine who still smokes, some of the pictures on the packets of cigarettes now, they're like Victorian freak shows. You know, men have been told they'll never get another erection. Women have been told that they might end up having sort of medical conditions that are absolutely... And it's true. I don't know a bit about the first bit, but it's true these health things, but everyone still smokes. Has anyone given up smoking because of the pictures on the packets of cigarettes? Or have you given up smoking because it now costs so much money and because the other types of health campaign have been so successful? I don't know. But my question for you is this. What the hell is wrong with putting tariffs and taxes on things that will cause diseases and health issues that the NHS will have to treat? Because it does two things. A, it raises money for people who persist in these behaviours and end up poorly, and that money can then be spent on treating them. But B, it acts as a deterrent against the behaviours that will render them poorly, which means they won't end up going into the NHS, which means we won't end up paying for them to be treated at all. So just in purely economic terms, as a free marketeer, temporarily, surely, given the current status of the NHS as being free at the point of care for everybody, surely precisely the shady lobbyists who are constantly wanging on about sugar taxes and nanny states and sin taxes, the people that Boris Johnson is genuflecting in front of today, surely they are the people who should be most in favour of these taxes on the grounds that it will take a huge chunk out of the money that the NHS will have to find to treat these people 20 years down the line. That's just a starter for 10, all right? I could have got it wrong. I've never done it this way round before. I've got an enormous interest in the issue of state corporate harm maximisation and the amount of effort that goes into wringing the last few pennies out of the nation's poorest people in order to further fill the coffers of the ones that own the fast food joints, or they've got shares in the payday loan companies or the fixed odds betting terminals. But on this occasion, on this issue, what is wrong with raising money from people who persist in behaviours that will make them poorly and using money to persuade people to stop the behaviours that will make them poorly in a country where the National Health Service will be charged with treating all of them if they don't change their habits? Answer from me, for now, absolutely nothing. Go on, pick holes in it. If we have an NHS that's free at the point of care, if obesity is now beating smoking as a main cause of 4 cancers, if treating cancer comes out of the coffers of the NHS, at the Treasury, ultimately, then putting tariffs and taxes on things that cause cancer, just to keep it really, really simple, tariffs and taxes on the things that massively increase the likelihood of cancer. So most obviously sugar and tobacco. So we've done it with tobacco. It seems to have worked. Obesity is now to blame for thousands more cases of bowel cancer, kidney cancer, liver cancer, and even ovarian cancer than tobacco use. What is the problem? Apart from people who make a lot of money out of selling this stuff, resenting the fact that the price is going up to raise money for the population rather than simply to raise money for them. They've got no problems with prices going up, these people, when they keep the money, right? They've only got a problem with it when it's a tax that the government gets, the same government that has to find the money to run the NHS, yeah? So apart from people who are going to make money out of it and who are perhaps going to channel some of that money into the pockets of mysteriously funded organisations that routinely claim that sugar taxes are bad, for example, or that restrictions upon fixed odds betting terminals are bad, for example, or that tobacco taxes and cigarette bans are bad, for example. In other words, apart from the people who make a ton of money out of the rest of us getting sick and poor, and the people they pay to put phrases like nanny state into the public discourse, and the lazy people in the media that don't stop to think for long enough to work out what's actually happening, but know that there's a lot of money to be made from telling people that they're under attack or under threat, which is what the phrase nanny state is designed to do. Look at those people over there looking after your children's health and trying to help you live longer. Yeah, down with that sort of thing. You see? Apart from them, who could actually have a problem with this? 0345 6060 973. Stephen's in Peterborough. Stephen, what would you like to say?
So, James, you're a lovely guy, and I love your programme.
Let's not get carried away, Stephen.
But you are coming at this from completely the wrong angle. You are coming at this from a duty of care angle, which means that you care about people. If you don't care about people, then you want them to be ill. You want them to be disabled so that you can make money out of it.
I just said that.
From my point of view, yeah, I know. So from my point of view, Boris is only doing this to curry favour with the people who are actually putting money in his coffers.
I just said all of that.
I know, I agree with you.
What do you mean I'm coming at it from the wrong angle?
Well,
I've literally just said everything you've just said, and you're accusing me of coming at it from the wrong angle.
Yeah, but you're doing it from a duty of care point of view.
Have you been at the cooking sherry again, Stephen?
No, you got me.
No, I understand the point you're making, is that it's a bit like when I'm a bit patronising to people and I say, yes, but of course you're not being logical. And you're saying...
That's right.
Well, I mean, it's a painful accusation to level at people that quite like the cut of Boris Johnson's jib, because what you're saying, and what I also happen to believe, is that he will pick their pockets and make them poorer and less healthy while convincing them that the enemy is do-gooders or the nanny state or health and safety legislation.
Who should make me pay for more sugar in my drinks? Do you do that, James O'Brien? You're agreeing with that, therefore I completely disagree with you.
Yes.
I'm an Englander and I'm going to have what I want in my Coke.
Exactly. And when I get bowel cancer or kidney cancer later in life...
I paid into the NHS and you should pay for it.
I haven't paid a fraction of what it's going to cost to treat you.
No.
So where is that money going to come from? We've got two choices.
Private.
Well, then the NHS ceases to be public.
No, the NHS will still be there. But what they'll do is they'll turn around and they'll have little wards that will turn around and there'll be private wards to do a set operation that makes them an absolute mint.
So why then? This is odd, isn't it? Because all of the lobby groups and think tanks and educational charities that claim there is no plan to privatise the NHS, they should be desperate to reduce the amount of people getting cancer and to reduce the amount of people getting diabetes and to reduce the amount of people getting obese. Otherwise, the bill that the NHS is... Yeah.
Will they then exist? If all them people are there, will those charities who are in place to actually stop this, will they then exist? Because they're being paid as a charity. Some of the charities in this country...
They are charities. They have charitable status. No, you're making a slightly different point from me. It's a bit like any good cause essentially agitates for its own extinction. You know, even the Commission of Racial Equality, in an ideal world, wouldn't exist. So the people that put all their energies into campaigning for racial equality are kind of campaigning for their own extinction. And sometimes, as Stephen alludes to, you wonder whether they really are campaigning to lose their 150 grand a year, not in the case of the CRE, but in the case of other big charities. I don't think, forgive my arrogance, you frankly should be used to it by now, but I don't think there's a hole in this. If you look at the people that routinely agitate for cuts or removals or resistance to taxes that are designed to moderate or influence our behaviour, right? They all claim that any fears that people like me have about the NHS being the next big con job for the people that managed to hoodwink us into voting for Brexit, they claim until they're blue in the face that no one's going to privatise the NHS, no one's going to privatise the NHS. Donald Trump says they are, or at least it will have to be on the table in a trade deal, and then someone whispers in his ear, we're not there yet. We're not doing that yet. So he comes out 24 hours later and says, oh, no, we're not. It doesn't. I mean, what do you believe? Black or white, raining or not raining? Doesn't matter. The confusion is there. But all of the people who insist that people like me are wrong when we think that there is a deep desire among certain types of politicians and more importantly, their super rich backers to undermine Anira and Bevan's vision for what the NHS would be, surely they're the people that should be using the instruments of government to minimise illness. Because if we're going to keep the NHS public, then reducing illness should be our top priority, right? Because it will save a ton of money. And if you do it by also potentially or perhaps raising money, 03456060973. What's not to like? Probably lots of things, and we'll find out before 12. Jeremy is in Derby. Jeremy, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, nice to speak to you. I usually agree, but I always agree 100% with what you're saying, and I mostly agree with what you're saying today, to be honest. The only thing is, if you've got a sort of a fixed tax on a can of pop or whatever, that does affect the poorest people more than the rich people. Someone like yourself will just say, oh, I'll just pay that 17p or whatever, whereas the poorer people will have to say, oh, I can't afford that. So surely
50%.
If it was something saying like 200, that's 200 quid to you, Mr. Rees-Mogg, you can buy that kind of pot for 200 quid. And
so means-tested sugar taxes.
Well, it's obviously virtually impossible to do, but the fact is that all these.
Well, you say it's virtually impossible to do. Have you considered technological solutions, Jeremy?
Alternative arrangements, for me. Yeah, why not? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a bit like what I'm quite like the thing about is climate change, and the principle with that has always been the polluter pays, and where you've got a higher, taxing on carbon taxes and so on, similar sort of thing. But the difficulty is that it's a regressive tax because
it's better than not having it. You're right because I took a call and some calls stick in my mind forever, and it's not necessarily the ones that at the time you think will stick in your mind forever, but it's going back a while. And we were talking about minimum pricing of alcohol, and a lady rang in who was living on the state pension. And this was a while ago, so it was still something you could do with a modicum of ease. And she enjoyed, because I remember laughing, because her accent and her frailty on air rather belied what she said to me. She enjoyed a couple of tins of what she described as cooking lager in front of the telly every night. And when we'd worked out what minimum pricing of alcohol might do to the own brand supermarket lager that she was chugging in front of EastEnders, she would not have been able to afford it anymore. And that temporarily persuaded me that the whole scheme was wrong.
Yeah.
Which is what you're saying.
Well, it's not wrong.
It's a problem. It's a flaw. But don't let the perfect
discouraging people from drinking that thing. The only problem is it shouldn't be the way of funding the NHS, because really the NHS should be funded mostly by the most wealthy people and so on. So,
yes.
Whereas if everyone has the same amount of pot,
but that's the interesting thing about
by the poorer people.
Yeah, equally. But I mean, the other bit of my theory you've just endorsed: the most wealthy people who may or may not be secretly channeling huge sums of money to educational charities, think tanks, and absolutely not lobby groups. If it's true when these educational charities and think tanks that are absolutely not lobby groups, if it's true that they don't want the NHS to be privatised, then all of the people who pay the most tax should be desperate to see the NHS bills reduced, which would be absolute grounds for supporting anything that minimise the likelihood of these kind of cancers and diseases.
Exactly, yeah. So, yeah, there's definitely, how do we discourage people is the question, and how do you tell people, right, you shouldn't be having loads of sugar, you shouldn't be doing this with your life, you should be being more sporty.
The tax, this is the other point about my introduction, isn't it? Because this is a lovely phone in today, because I'm learning and I'm arriving at new conclusions. Sometimes when we talk about this stuff, I feel that we're retreading very familiar territory. But because I got asked on South Sunday, do you mind paying the sugar tax? It wasn't the 17 pence that resonated with me. It was the reminder of what a bag of sugar would look like if it contained the amount of sugar that was in the drink I was about to buy. So it works on a psychological as well as an economic material level. What's not to like? 0345 606 0973. It's 11:30. Quick nod for people of a certain age. I'm going to see Adrian Mole, the musical, tonight. I'll let you know tomorrow whether it lives up to the deep affection that many of us have for the magnificent books written by Sue Townsend, the late Sue Townsend. Is it, do you weep, Mrs. Thatcher, do you weep? I love that poem. Something about, do you weep like a willow on your Marks and Spencer's pillow? And then at the age of 13 3/4, he writes at the end of that poem, I think this poem is extremely brilliant. It's the sort of thing that could bring the government to its knees. I can't wait to go tonight. I'll let you know how I get on. In the meantime, the simple equation is this, right? Obesity now beats smoking as main causes of 4 cancers. We know that putting huge taxes on smoking, although it obviously discriminates or disproportionately affects people with less money. If you got loads and loads of money in the bank, then you could charge 20 quid for a packet of fags and people would still be smoking 40 a day. If you're skint and you can't afford to spend 40 quid a day on your cigarette habit, you will stop smoking. You will cut down, even though it is addictive and horribly hard to do sometimes, in most cases, you will do it. So yes, it is going to hit people with less money harder than it will hit people with lots of money. With that little side order of psychology that I mentioned before. But it worked. There it is. There's your proof. Tobacco use has dropped 25%. Vapors are now going up, so that'll need addressing by public policy and government, because these people just they move. I told you when payday loans finally got addressed by government policy that they'd move into gambling, because that's what these people do. They look upon you and me, the population, as a crop. And every year they try and harvest as much of our money as they humanly can. That's what they do. That's why you can now buy your fizzy drinks in 1.5 litre cups, when I was a kid, a Panda Pop was about the size of a urine sample and it felt like a treat. You'd get a Panda Pop about half the size of a normal can, and that was still a treat on a school trip or something like that. Now, you can buy a bucket of soda with so much sugar in it that you could probably plaster a small bungalow. And that's the point. They make more money that way. So it works because of what we've learned from cigarettes. Why wouldn't we do it to the things that now cause obesity? Because obesity now beats smoking as the main cause of 4 cancers. And if these people that fund these so-called think tanks and educational charities that are constantly telling us they definitely don't want to privatise the NHS, if these people really want the NHS to remain free at the point of care and publicly funded, then surely they want to reduce the amount of people getting cancer. Otherwise, it's going to cost us a fortune to treat them. And taxpayers, who they claim sometimes to represent, are going to have to pay for all these people whose cancer is caused in part by consuming products that they want to continue to make massive profits on and don't want people to stop consuming. Look, I'm sorry to sound cocky, but I think this is watertight. I really do. Let's find out. Andrew's in Liverpool. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Right.
So I think you might have already touched on a few of my points already on that little monologue. But I'm no fan of Boris Johnson, and I'm scared that either of these two will be Prime Minister. But as soon as this idea of sugar tax came about from Jamie Oliver, I didn't think it was a good idea. I think it's education. It's not making something so expensive that people can't buy it.
It's not either or. I mean, it's 17 pence on a £3 pop. I don't know exactly what the numbers are. I'll double check. But if you're in the market for spending £3 on a bucket of pop, a 17 pence increase is not going to dissuade many people from buying it on economic grounds. It will some, I grant you. But with me on Sunday, it just reminded me how much sugar was in the drink. It was as if the fact that the cinema assistant had to say, do you mind paying? There's a sugar tax on this of 17 pence. Do you mind that? Made me stop and think. I thought, well, I will treat myself on this occasion, but this is why I gave up or cut down hugely on fizzy pop, because it's full of sugar. So it's not just money. It works as a deterrent in more subtle ways.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to the shops, though, it doesn't say there's a 20p sugar tax on this drink, does it?
I don't know. I need to check on this. Does it not say it on the label?
I don't buy pop very much.
But it might not say there is. But if you've got Coke Zero next to regular Coke is now going to be more expensive than Coke Zero. So it might not say there's a tax on this, but you can see it.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. Yeah. But I still think it's education more. The reason I gave up smoking was not because the price of cigarettes was going up and off. It was because I'd been educated. Now, this sugar tax, I don't know this. Is this money that's being collected, is that going to be going on education, or is this just going to be put into the general...
If we've demonised the word nanny state, I don't know if it's specifically targeted at health things, but it doesn't matter, because the NHS is one of the biggest draws upon the public purse, and anything raised by taxation goes into the public purse. So indirectly, if not directly, I don't know is the short answer to what you're asking me, but indirectly, yeah, of course it's going towards health education and arguably more importantly at this point, healthcare. And you mentioned Jamie Oliver. We would not be talking about any of this if it wasn't for his campaigns. That's education. He does the education. He never shuts up about it, bless his little cotton socks. He really cares. I don't know why, but if there's an obese child over there at risk of diabetes, Jamie Oliver cares more about their health than their own parents do. And I don't know why. It's just the way he's made. And I take my hat off to him, but you can do both. You can do both.
Education point, I think, isn't it? So
it's not either or.
I know, but if you've got somebody who isn't educated in the dangers of sugar and obesity and stuff, then what happens? You know, they're just going to be ending up spending more and more money.
Yeah, so but it's belt and braces. No, I'm not arguing with you. You need the education, of course you do, but it will be even more effective with the with the tax, with the financial incentives. It's a bit like, obviously I'm not in favour of corporal punishment, but it's a little bit like if you're being taught the piano by someone who sits there telling you how brilliant the piano is and how important it is to do your scales, or you've been taught the piano by someone who raps you over the knuckles with a wooden ruler every time you make a mistake. You're going to get better at the piano quicker, in the short term at least, with the ruler wielder than you are with the boring old romantic. 11:41 is the time. 03456060973 is the number that you need. There isn't a silver bullet to reduce obesity, says Professor Linda Bald of Cancer Research UK. She is their prevention expert. But the huge fall in smoking over the years, partly thanks to advertising and environmental bans, shows that government-led changes works. It was needed to tackle sky-high smoking rates, and now the same is true for obesity. One of the best-named men on the planet, Tam Fry from the National Obesity Forum, says health specialists were warning that obesity would be the new tobacco years ago, but no one in Whitehall heeded them. Now that the disease is beating smoking as a risk factor for cancers, it should frighten the new Prime Minister into atoning for past negligence, unless, of course, the new Prime Minister is more interested in the support of mysterious men and women who secretly fund think tanks and educational charities that are categorically not lobby groups, but do seem to exercise undue influence over public policy and perhaps more importantly over the media. This is my next big subject. The media is being infiltrated by these organisations that no one knows who pays them. And yet you will never hear a conversation on most radio and television programmes about everything from tobacco and obesity through to the NHS and gambling machines without one of these people from these outfits popping up claiming to speak for, I don't know, taxpayers. It's quite incredible what's happened without us really noticing. Until possibly it's too late, because you can bet your bottom dollar they're all pro-Brexit as well, on the grounds that people who see the population of this country as a crop to be harvested will do well out of Brexit. It's just the crops that will suffer. Lawrence is in Tottenham. Lawrence, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. How are you?
All good, mate. What's on your mind?
Good. Listen, I usually like to give an opinion.
Oh, no, the phone line's gone down. Don't worry, we're here till 12 on this subject, so we'll definitely get back up. Alison's in Crawley. Alison, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello, Alison.
I just wanted to sort of dispel a myth. Whilst I think that it's absolutely the way to go to try and reduce the number of people suffering cancers and what have you from smoking or obesity or whatever, the idea that saves the NHS money is a complete myth. Because if you die prematurely, even if before dying you have had to have treatment for, I know, say, terminal lung cancer, that will be cheaper for you as an individual than having to replace your hip, replace your knee, treat your arthritis, do your cataract.
you win.
Look after
No, you've got that. That is a chink in the armour of my arrogant certainty that I'd got this one nailed to the floor. Alison, I mean,
honestly,
it's anecdotal. There'll be plenty of, because you're more likely to need a hip replacement if you're obese.
No, but overall, if you look across the population, if you make everyone live longer, they will cost the NHS more.
So we should be encouraging smoking to save money?
Oh, no, of course we should, because we should be encouraging people to be healthy and to have good lives and long lives.
But the healthier they are, the healthier they are, the longer they live. But also the healthier they are, the less call they have upon the health services. So, I mean, there is a balance to be struck here, but you're right to remind us that actually living...
We all get wear and tear. We all get wear and tear, things like cataracts and hip replacements, and being fit and jogging is no saviour from that.
Yes.
And the drugs bill in the NHS is one of the biggest bills. And think of the number of people who are on drugs from the age of, say, I don't know, 65, 70, that they stay on until they're in their 90s, and they're free because they've got free prescriptions, which I also think is a good thing. But, this is not an easy sort of cost saving to save people from premature death. It really isn't.
Well, I'm not going to take that as 100% gospel. It's a wrinkle in my...
There are papers on it, honestly.
It's a wrinkle in my confidence, but equally, if we reduced obesity as well... then what happens? You're not going to need a hip replacement. You're not going to get diabetes. And also, oddly, if you include the social care bill in the healthcare bill, which at the moment we don't do, then I think you've spanked me from here to kingdom come. I haven't got to come back at all, because looking after people who are just sort of withering as fragility, as opposed to being diagnosed as ill, is a massive problem for the future. But are we not just nudging towards Soylent Green here, Alison?
What a nightmare. Yes, quite possibly. Yes.
Be careful what you wish for. It's 11:46. I'm not being cynically provocative, but after 12 o'clock, I'd like to try to get to the bottom of why almost all of us feel so passionately about so-called trophy hunters. People shoot... I mean, some people I really, really like in the public eye get terribly exercised about this. And I know it's a little bit lazy to say, let's worry about the lions and the elephants when we've got homelessness and child poverty under control. But I do kind of mean it, actually. And if you're cross about someone killing a lion for fun, how come you're so cool with them killing a cow for dinner? This is me acknowledging my own hypocrisy. I feel furious inside when I see some desiccated American posing with the carcass of a rhinoceros. Daily Mirror is the reason why we're discussing it. They've done a great investigation into a British trophy hunter. But why? And I do have a little pet peeve about very, very, very privileged people who don't say that much about human suffering. Indeed, I guess in the context of Conservative Party politicians, you could suggest that they aren't just comfortable with human suffering, they cause it with their policies, but they are absolutely passionate about protecting rhinoceri. I just want to have a look at that after 12 with your help. Before that, back to the sugar tax. Lawrence is in Tottenham. The phone line defeated us, Lawrence. Where were we?
It did, yeah. Well, physically, I was in the middle of Clissold Park, which probably wasn't the best place to get reception. I'm now on the outskirts, closer to Finsbury. So,
good man. Where were we?
Apologies for that.
That's all right.
I just wanted to a little bit of a counterpunch to the last lady that called.
Yes.
I mean, you could. It's pretty cutting looking at it like that. If people die young, you save money. My counter argument would be if someone's parent or grandparent or carer that dies young, and a child has to see that suffering and go through the whole trauma of seeing a loved one die young, what is the psychological effect? Will that person end up being more of an issue to the taxpayer long term due to crime or depression or drug taking? Do you see what I mean? So I don't think it's...
Of course I do. And even though you might make a case for totting up all the NHS treatment received over 80 years instead of 65 years, who knows what else might have happened during those 15 years that would have other costs, both material and emotional and psychological. So yes, it's a very good point. Generally speaking, trying to make people as healthy as they can possibly be has to be an aim of a civilised society.
Psychologically, it's going to be just far more greater than the physical, oh, well, they popped off early, that's going to save us a bit of dough in the short term. It's just very short-sighted, I think.
Yes, I do. That's not why you rang in.
That's not why I rang. So I usually call to give my opinion. I feel like I'm kind of on the front line with what I do. I teach up in Tottenham. I work with kids that are in and out of young offenders, care units, so they might have severe learning difficulties. A lot of them are involved in gangs, etc. And so this idea that, by cutting sugar tax, we're going to affect the kind of people that I work with, I just think is nonsense. I mean, let me give you an example. Our students, they get given £5 a day by our college. We're a registered charity to help these guys, and that's just enough for them to get them a little bit of food. What do you think a £5 a day gets them at lunchtime? They'll come back in from the local corner shop with 6 cans of KA, I think it's called KA juice, the highly sugared cartons of juice. Anyway, really, really high. You've got flavours like bubblegum flavour and apple flavour. So 6 cartons for 60p they can get, and whereas a bottle of Volvic is £1.20, and it's just sort of, that's their really only option. And or they get a can of Boost energy drink for 30p, and it's really detrimental to their learning.
Then I understand the point you're making.
Yeah,
but they need much, much, much bigger taxes on them then.
Well, this is what I was going to say. I think the stuff that's most harmful psychologically and physical, especially to the most vulnerable in society. Because my point was going to be, how do you think they're going to learn? How do you think they're going to concentrate for the rest of the day if they just had 6 cans of sugar?
Well, they're
going to be buzzing for the first half an hour and then they're going to crash.
Well, everyone talks about it. But also you can get forgive me, but your average meal deal in a supermarket is you get change out of £4 and you come away with a sandwich, a drink, and a packet of crisps or a chocolate bar. So you've got good sustaining food and you've got a little treat as well. So why are we not putting more effort into telling them that? Forgive me if I'm being stupid.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, that's £4, but £1 gets you 6 wings at the local chicken shop, and with 20p you can get a can of Boost energy drink.
Yeah.
And again, it's education. Of course it is. You know, I
have you got
tell
water
them, look,
fountains at school and reusable bottles?
well, no, of course we don't. This is what I was going to say. The tax, if you hike up the tax on, because it's not just the sugary drinks. You know, there's a reason why you can't. Once you pop, you can't stop. You know, these cheapest foods trying to be addictive, so it's not necessarily their fault. They're craving the sugar. You know, after half an hour after they've had that crash. You know, we've all seen Super Size Me, and that's what you do. You build up this kind of strange, absurd addiction to something that's like not very good for you. And you know, if you hike up the tax on that, lower the tax on stuff that's healthy for you. You know, imagine being able to walk into Whole Foods as a 14-year-old from Tottenham and actually being able to afford a ginger shot and a bottle of water.
Yeah.
You know, that
Yeah,
you know,
but I didn't do that. I was very conscious not to say, well, why can't they all eat quinoa? I did specifically go for the cheese and onion sandwich. Cheese and onion sandwich in Tesco's 99p.
Well, what I brought in a load of those ginger shots, and as an experiment, I said, look, take this and tell me you're not getting a buzz, the same buzz you get off your can of Boost, off this. And all of them took it, and the first time they took it was like, oh, God, ginger, that's intense. Yeah. And then they were like, next day, can I have another one? That was wicked. I woke up off that. And I just think, obviously, it's not easy. It's not, Rome wasn't built in a day, but, you know, the money...
Changing behaviour is the goal.
Like you say, water fountains. Why are there water fountains on Tottenham High Road where the poorest live? Why aren't there water fountains in the Bernie Grant Arts Centre next to where I teach? Why isn't there water fountains where people really need it, especially with this sweltering...
What do you think the answer is? Presumably short-term investment would have a long-term benefit, but it wouldn't necessarily A, win any votes, or B, feel like you were saving money by spending money.
No, I guess so. But
it's like you know what you've done. You've given us the civic equivalent of the reusable bottle, haven't you? Because you want to buy. I'm afraid I haven't done this yet myself, but you want to buy one of these reusable coffee cups. You're dropping about a tenner. I mean, they're not cheap, or a fiver. And you stand in there and you look at that, and you think, I'm not paying £10 for that. I can get a free one. And I'll chuck it away. But of course, the change to society when you buy an expensive one, but presumably you get your coffee for a little bit cheaper if you use your own cup, do you? I don't know.
I've got no idea.
Nor do I, but that's part of the problem, Loris. Here's us setting the world to right, and we don't even know the actual ins and outs of what's going on now. But the water fountain on Tottenham High Road would be the same as the reusable coffee cup. You might have to pay a bit of extra for it today, but every other tomorrow that comes, bingo.
But the reusable coffee cup, you know, let's face it, you've got to remember it, you've got to keep it, you've got to not forget it on the bus, you've got to not forget it on the tube, you know, whereas you're walking up the high road, sweating. I know, well, that's
behavioural change, that's convenience, that's persuading people to do something that in the first instance they might consider to be a little bit inconvenient or even uncomfortable, discomforting, but persuading them that it is worth doing, and you need money to do that. And what these people really hate is the idea of money being spent on helping people make better decisions, because there is money to be made from leaving people to make the bad decisions. And that's why the phrase nanny state is the new political correctness. Political correctness turned into a dirty word, and somehow an entire population of people got turned against good manners and decency. Nanny state? Oh, what did you think of your nanny? I never met my nans. But my Auntie Lily, who was one of my nanny's sisters, is one of the most positive and benign influences on my entire life. If you were a posh kid, someone like Rees Mogg no doubt rails against the nanny state, and his old nanny still lives with him. So, nannies are generally a force for good. They make you learn. They encourage you to make healthy decisions. They discourage you from doing stupid things. What's the point of a government if not to maximise the health and welfare of a population? Answer, under Boris Johnson, oh no, we want to minimise the health and welfare of the population, and all of the people who are invested in fat, sugar, everything else that makes you obese, we want them to get even richer.